A lot of abductees report being shown images, whether on a screen or directly in their heads, of catastrophic, cataclysmic events, the earth cracking or burning, or environmental collapse, total, utter disaster. And you don't know if that's metaphorical, if it's a warning, if it's the concrete future, and if the change or the integration is going to occur before then or after then, or what. Do you have any sense yourself as to what to make of those kinds of images?
I have waxed and waned on this over the years. Years ago, when I first began to hear this, I assumed that one of the things I looked at when people were seeing these images, oftentimes beings were staring into their eyes, and that still happens. And that there's sort of some neurological engagement that's going on. So my guess at that time was that in some way, and this was years ago, and I had no knowledge of how they were doing anything there, but I figured that they were examining people's reactions to these awful scenes of cataclysm and atomic war and the earth cracking in half and floods and all the rest. So they were. And my model was the experimenter learning model, you see, and so I thought that's what they were looking at. We're learning on how people react. But when you hear hundreds of these, after a while, it doesn't make any sense. You figure out fairly quickly that people will be shocked or anxious or whatever it is, and then I began to realize that other things might be at work here. And I used to think, well, the content of what people are seeing is of no importance whatsoever. It's and that still may be true. But I now have a slightly different take on this. I think that this is more a neurologically based set of images which are either reinforcing neural pathways or changing neural pathways. I think that what's happening here with these kinds of images has more to do with the neurology of the brain than something that is predictive about what is going to happen in the future. Now, having said that, in the future, something like this may happen. I don't know. I hope not, obviously. And if that's the case, would this be in some way a signal this is when the change will come? And if that's the case, would abductees then have a role to play that they are in some way being trained for? Because there are many cases where people are acting out as in a prescribed plan. They have to do this, that, in these images, and maybe it's part of a training exercise, which would still be neurologically based, of course. So I don't really know what all this means, but I have a sense that this is still part of the future and that it is a neurologically based aspect, perhaps, of training where something will kick in when some event happens.
That does seem to be a common theme also. A lot of abductees talk about being put in front of a console. They're being trained to operate alien equipment. A lot of them seem to have a sense that they do have a mission or a role to play during or after the change, whatever that is, as if they are indeed being programmed for a job or something. This does all seem to be pointing to some, and also because it's done with particular people right now. Presumably, it's training for some kind of event that's going to be in their lifetime. I would presume.
I do think that this is going to be within the realm of someone's lifetime who's alive now. Maybe not mine, but someone's lifetime. I do think so. I don't think that this is. We're very far off. I don't think 40 years from now is very far off, if that's the outermost limits, or even 50 or 60 years. And I recently, investigated a case in which a woman was shown had some interaction with some young children, older than toddlers, but children, hybrid children, and she was told that these particular children will be in positions of authority, essentially, in your society. That these people will be important in your society. This was, I didn't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. That he was indicating not generically people, but these ones right here, which means it's in their lifetime, and that they have a normal human type lifetime. And we don't know how old they're going to be. So I do think the indications that I've been getting, and this was just a session that I did 2 weeks ago, the indications are that this is something that we might live to see, in other words. And so whatever happens, I don't see happening somewhere in the distant future. Frankly, I hope it does happen in the distant future, and frankly, I hope it doesn't happen at all, but I hope that if it happens in the very distant future, as distant as possible. But that's not what people indicate to me, unfortunately.